Well, thanks very much. There's, I think, no group I'd rather get this kind of an honor from. I should say, by the way, I haven't talked or had a little exchange with Ember this morning. She told me that she was not going to be talking about her newest development, so I think I should say a word about that. She and Jim Gunner, over the last year or so, have been creating at the National Charter Schools Institute, based in Michigan, of which Jim Gunner is now the president and head, a library, partly of the beginnings of chartering and the spread across the country, but also to contain a continuing record of what's developing in the charter sector. And Ember has done quite a bit of taping of her recollections, a kind of oral history, and I'm not sure that's fully up on the website yet. I think the idea is that people in the various states where the legislatures enacted chartering through the 90s will put some of their own recollections and papers into the library in their own historical societies. And these days, since it can be done electronically, it'll all be linked through this National Library in Michigan. I would like to take just a couple of minutes to put chartering into a larger perspective. That's kind of what I do. Gene's right. I mean, I think I've always thought it's very important to keep the ideas straight, which is not easy to do. I think I've been accused at times even of putting the larger context in a larger context. But essentially, I think the important thing to say is that chartering is a state strategy for the improvement of the whole public education system. The paper that Gene kindly referred to that I wrote in the summer of 1990, and which you can read if you care to on the Education Evolving website. It is there, isn't it, Lars? Still there. The one I titled, "The State Will Have to Withdraw the Exclusive." The point was, this is the state's problem. The state has a problem, and you could tell that in those days. Governors here and legislators, people all around the country were feeling that they were not getting from the districts the kind of change and improvement they needed. And they were wondering what to do about that. They were told, of course, that they could go to vouchers. But if they didn't want to go to vouchers, and most of them didn't, vouchers meaning private schools, then they had to accept the system as it stood, take the district sector in its current form, and do the best they could with money and exhortation and whatever. And all you had to do was look at them and say, no, you don't. This is your system. It exists in your law. You make this law. If the districts aren't giving you what you believe the state wants and needs, it is entirely within your power to get somebody else who will. And my experience in this is that they would look at you for about 20 seconds, and then this big smile would come over their face when they got it. And once they got it, they never lost it. And that I think is, as much as anything, what accounts for the fact that the charter idea spread around the country through the 90s in almost all the major states in that decade, always against the opposition of all the interests that the realists and the education, political reporters thought would kill any kind of initiative. But in addition to the surprise represented by the enactment of these laws all across the country was the surprise about the schools created. You have to remember, no charter law created any school. These were enabling laws, and people had to come out. What the charter laws did was to activate a suppressed desire in the American public for something different. And so all over the country, good citizens and others, parents and activists and others came up in the early years when there was no way to do it except with sweat equity to create these kinds of schools. So the charter sector, as I like to say today, represents the R&D sector of American public education from the state standpoint. Because all the laws were open as to the kind of school that could be created. How large it would be, how it would teach, how it would organize, everything about it was open. And a fair amount of innovation did occur. There are a lot of conventional schools, people trying to do conventional school better, which is fine. There were also non-traditional and non-conventional schools. I think where we are at the moment is that after 25 or 30 years, the charter sector has proved it and itself. And it's what I say now as I go around is to legislators again, is that the success of public education in general and the success of the district sector in particular requires a strong and successful charter sector. Without the flow of innovations coming in from the charter sector, and to be candid, without the pressure of the competition for enrollment and the financing implications of that competition for enrollment, the district sector itself on its own, without that, could never generate internally the will and the ability to make the changes that it's required. So my message to the legislators today is that chartering remains an essential part of the state strategy for the improvement of public education. I like to think this is reflected in the decision by the Education Commission of the States in 2011 to recognize chartering as an important contribution to American public education. One of the innovations, and there are many, but one of the ones that I've been involved in since that is a part of the initial legislative intent has to do with teachers. You heard a good deal earlier about Shanker's presence at the Itasca seminar and the fact that this was conceived of as something for teachers. We did some years ago start a initiative to spread out beyond Minnesota. One of the innovations that had developed in Minnesota, particularly in the new country down at Henderson, Lusura and Henderson, which is a school that would be organized on the professional partnership model that all of us are familiar with in other white-collar vocational areas we think of as professional. Doctors, lawyers, accountants, auditors, engineers, architects, and so forth. And district teachers and charter teachers talking happily about this idea, how to get that arrangement, and how to spread it once they have it. My 14 minutes and 8 seconds have exactly expired, and Gene, let me thank you again. I would say also that a few months ago, if you haven't seen it, Education Evolving and the Center for Policy Design actually put out this little guidebook to the Minnesota charter sector. And if you haven't got a copy, Gene can get you a copy, or Lars could send some copies out of the office in downtown St. Paul. John Custuris wrote it. It's a very nice way of explaining it, and with a lot of links to people. It's a part of helping legislators and others understand, again, the larger context of what's going on here. Thank you, Gene.